Hello and welcome to Cinemondo with Kathy, Mark, and a special guest, Jim Payne.
Yes. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Jim. Jim is coming to us from across the waves in the UK. Where are you located in
I live in London.
Oh, you live right in London.
Sunny London. It's tipping it down with rain at the moment, so it's very, very typical of this.
We're having London weather right now. It's raining.
We are. So
I can't feel sorry for you.
I know you can't because
don't feel sorry for us. 90% of the time it's perfect weather, so we deserve this.
And we've got the opposite. We have 90% of the time when it's awful, and then we have about 10% of the time when it's just roasting hot. So
sounds perfect.
Yeah, it's great, and it's humid. It's brilliant.
Okay, so that's all. We were just talking about weather today. So see you guys later.
I mean, this is what you asked me on to talk about, right?
Yeah, we're actually talking about weather. Yes.
Great. I can do that.
Well. It's really, thank you for coming on. And we can first talk about what, we, about a month ago, we had Ben Steiner on, who wrote and directed the film Matriarch, which you can currently see on Hulu here worldwide. And that was a great interview. He was a lot of fun, and we really were big fans of the film and still are. I actually saw it a second time this week.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. And then we got an email from Jim. Sort of ribbing.
A tweet.
It was a tweet. Okay, it was a tweet. So,
it was a jocular tweet.
It was
kind of ripping on Ben, just in a very friendly way, saying thanks for including me or mentioning me in the podcast. So
or not mentioning me. That was the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was calling him a knobhead. That I'm like, we gotta have this guy on right now.
Is that an expression you guys have? I'm guessing not.
No. But I love it. I'm using it now.
So,
is that a British term? Am I fancy?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a soft word for a dickhead, basically.
Yeah. Being a knob, being a knob is being a dick. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was thinking like doorknob. That's how innocent I am.
Well, it's sort of multi-purpose, I think.
So we said we got to have Jim on because he's obviously has a sense of humor about it, and we'd also love to learn about editing because that's obviously such an important part of filmmaking. A film is made or not made in the editing room, and I think Matriarch was extremely well made in all facets. So obviously he did a great job with that film.
Thank you.
So we'd love to talk about how you got into this. You've been doing it for a while. I checked out your IMDb page, and you've done a lot of work. So
well, I used to have hair when I started. So
it was a job. It just went away.
How did I start? Well, how far back do I go? I mean, when I was a kid, I always just like everybody. I love films, and I used to watch. We didn't really go to the cinema very much. Couldn't really afford it because we were like 4 kids and all the rest of it. So we ended up watching a lot of stuff, 2 years afterwards after it came on. And so my dad and I would watch Star Trek a lot, and that's how we sort of bonded. And I've got a Wrath of Khan poster there, which I need to put up on the on the wall. And I just fell in love with it. And I was always sort of quite a creative kid and wanted to do something in the creative. I was either going to become a vet, like a veterinarian, or I was going to do something sort of creative. And then I sort of had a bit of difficulty. I became quite ill and had to leave school early. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, or it was kind of like, everything had slightly fallen apart. And so, I sort of just did this media course at college, and it changed my life. Apart from anything else, it kind of brought me out of my shell, and it made me feel, confident enough to kind of go out into the world and, meet people and the rest of it. But it also it made me realize, oh, actually, I could do this. I could actually make these films. And obviously, these sort of things you direct and you write and you hold the boom and you'll do all that kind of stuff. And and the part that I loved the most was the editing, because I felt like it was, A, you could sit down for a living. That was a big part. And B, it felt like a sandbox. You could play with stuff, especially if you were shooting it yourself. But even if other people were shooting it for you, you have all these kind of options. You can sort of work it out, and you have a little bit of time to kind of think, oh, maybe that'll work, maybe that'll work. And previous to that, I'd only ever thought of it as being, oh, well, you just stick the shots together. I mean, that's just how it works. It's not really a creative job. But obviously, I learned that it's one of the most important creative jobs on the film. So that's sort of how I began.
Yeah, and it's so true because what your decisions, like for instance, with Matriarch, was Ben like over your shoulder saying, like keep this scene longer, or were you worked, or did he give you some autonomy to sort of figure out
Well,
yourself?
the process was because of the pandemic. We were shooting it obviously kind of towards the end of the pandemic, and there was a lot of kind of COVID issues and blah blah blah. And so actually 95% of the process was remote. And so while they were shooting, they were sending me the rushes, and I was assembling it and then sending it to them to show that I was actually doing the job. And then I had like a little period of time after the shoot to put it together, kind of almost like an editor's cut. I sort of don't like the expression editor's cut because you always got one mind on what the director might want. It's never a case of this is exactly how I want it to be.
I'm my movie now.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So then he watched it and liked a lot of it, and a lot of it is quite close to what we had in the first place, but there's a lot of stuff that he wanted to try and change, and so he would sort of give me notes, and eventually he and I just sat on Zoom basically for days and days and said, can you try that, can you move that, what if we do this, and then we'd work out what works on the page and what didn't quite work in the script, and then we just sort of go through this iterative process of kind of,
right.
And then, you get it to a point where you're happy with it, and then you send it to, or, semi-happy with it, and then you sort of send it to, in our case, the people at Disney and Hulu, and then they give you notes. And in actual fact, we kind of pushed to get some reshoots done, not reshoots, additional shooting to kind of up the kind of horror stuff, because I think there was a lot of, the relationship stuff really worked really well.
Yeah.
But towards the middle of the film, it felt a little bit like the danger had gone away, and so we were kind of like, it'd be really good if we could do this and whatnot, and and also Hulu kind of agreed with that, so it wasn't much of a fight to kind of get them to put up the money, and then you just sort of go through this process, and then we had 2 weeks working together in the same room, which is great, in Pinewood, Pinewood Studios, and that process really was quite transformative, actually, even though it was only 2 weeks and we're sort of towards the end of the process. Just being in the same room, the energy that you.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, it is different.
Because you're, it's one thing, as an editor in the pandemic, it's okay. My job really, I'm kind of doing it by myself, so it doesn't change that much. But obviously, when you're in the same room and you really can connect and communicate without this, I think it makes a difference. And so you felt like that 2 weeks really sort of solidified the film and brought the vision.
Yeah, I mean, we were able to kind of. We were able to watch it back multiple times together. And I think when you watch a film with someone else in the room, the energy changes. And
it does.
I always feel like I always push on the films I do, even the very low budget, even short films. Can we just get into a cinema for half an hour or 2 hours just to watch it? Because watching it on the big screen, your eyes move differently. You take the information in differently, and something that might work on, a laptop screen that a lot of people are kind of watching it on might not watch. And also, I think, not to get too philosophical about it, but I think if you make films for the cinema, even if they're only going to be on Netflix or whatever, that psychologically affects how the audience watches it, because they're watching what they consider our film. But if you shoot everything for TV, then everything becomes quite close and everything becomes quite, because someone's only 10 feet away from the screen and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, what's been great, actually, I think over the last few years is, with the advent of giant TVs and, all that kind of thing, there are really cinematic TV series now in a way that there kind of never really was before.
Right.
And I kind of, I really kind of try and push that idea that we kind of imagine it's going to be on a 60-foot screen rather than people just watching it on their phones on the way to work or whatever.
Oh, does that just break your heart to know that someone's watching all that?
No, because I want people to watch it. Honestly, I mean, I'm not one of these kind of people, you can't have it in, it's got to be 16:9. It can't be 9:16 or whatever.
Right.
I just think people consume things differently, and there was a TVs used to be 4:3 and then they become 16:9. I think that's great. And now I look back at 4:3 and I go, oh, that's a bit, but at the time I didn't think.
No, that's all you had.
I'd rather someone watch it at all than just go, well, I'm not going to watch it at home, because I've got the kids or whatever. I'm happy for people. I get a thrill out of knowing people have watched stuff. I think sometimes especially when you're beginning, you can kind of toil in what's the word? People just don't know who you are and don't know the word.
Obscurity.
Obscurity.
Obscurity. That's the word.
Yeah.
And so I had a sort of a previous life as a documentary editor. And some of the stuff I did got like 10, 15 million views in quite a small country, in England, where it's 70 or 80 million population. And so that's really thrilling. But if you take a short film to a festival and there's 200 people there and they go, "Oh, that was really good," that's also really thrilling.
True.
So I just like people, it's made for people to watch. It's not made to just put on a shelf.
That's true.
And I think
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say Matriarch, I think, is very cinematic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a story about,
Right.
if people don't know, I haven't seen the film, it's a relationship story between a mother and a daughter, then it kind of goes on from there, and it sort of turns into British folk horror elements.
Folk horror, it's dysfunctional family, it's personal issues, and it's funny and quite profound and silly and dark, and there's a lot going on. And that was actually one of the challenges of making the film, was like the tonal shifts between scenes. And so so that was a challenge, because actually we ended up cutting out some quite funny lines in the middle of quite dark sequences, because it slightly took away the tension of what we were trying to do. But and there were some lines just like, that was really funny,
and you're like,
sure it sort of takes away from it. So
it's
kill your darlings, that's what they say.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Ben mentioned that, like, there's some stuff that, but kill your darling. It's hard to do, but.
Well, otherwise you just end up with a 4-hour film and no one's going to watch it, are they?
It's got to be so hard to cut stuff that you love. I mean, So how do you? I was trying to think. So I'm trying to wrap my head around like how you approached a project. So how are you actually found, like, hired as the editor? And then when they tell you, I guess when you get hired and you hear about the film, do you already have some sort of thoughts in your head how you think it should run even before you've seen it? Do you read a script? Like, what's the process, like, nuts and bolts? I'm always like fascinated by that.
So sort of going back a little bit, when I left university, I would just do anything. So, you just do anything. There's that Malcolm Gladwell quote about doing 10,000 hours, getting your reps in, essentially. And I did some decent stuff and some terrible stuff that I'll never show anybody. And so I didn't analyze it all that much at that time. I was just like, I'll just do whatever. Now, kind of almost 20 years in, and I shouldn't, I'm not Michael Kahn. Do you know what I mean? I'm not someone who's like, I'm batting scripts away at all times. So it's not like I am
too busy.
Yeah, exactly. But I do turn things down quite often, because it's interesting. I was talking to a DP friend of mine recently, and he was saying, there's a film I've been asked to do. It's shooting in Austria, so it'd be like a paid holiday. The script's not very good, but like the lighting team's all my mates, so it's like a holiday with my mates that we're shooting a film on. That's great for him, but for me, I'm sitting on my own in a room just watching the footage. And so I don't have that other side of it to kind of, so it's purely about the material for me and the script. And if I don't like the script or don't care about it that much, unless it's paying a lot of money, then it's a long time to kind of, and you've kind of, again, not to get too sort of pretentious about it, but you've got to put everything into it to make it work. And, if you're putting everything into something that you sort of know from the beginning isn't that great, that's a difficult position to be in. So at a certain point, I just thought, I'm not going to do stuff that I don't like 100% care about, unless they're going to pay for my mortgage. So but in terms of like the process, so someone will send me a script or someone will email me. Twitter has been brilliant recently, actually, because I've made so many good friends and connections through Twitter, and also like I have an agent, people and he'll put me forward for things, and so you just read the script, and if it's a TV series that's already been going on, you watch all the episodes. And then you sort of identify talking points, I think, from like, so you watch like the first series of something and you're about to do, they're asking you to do the second series. And then you work out what's good about the first series and what maybe could be improved. And then you kind of work out how you can tell them that without them being offended. Do you know what I mean? So basically the idea being that this is what I can bring to it. Right. So I'm not just a pair of hands pressing the buttons. I can actually bring something to it.
I was wondering.
And then also just sort of on a practical level, you look at it and go, well, you don't need that film. But, at this point, I can look at a script and go, you don't need that transitional scene. It'd be better if you
that's interesting.
Together. Right. That scene where you explain it might be useful in the script. And I'm not telling you not to film it, but we probably will cut it out. and you could have saved half a day shooting something else.
Wow.
You know, that kind of stuff. People have found that really useful. You know, especially on like indie films where the money is like just not there. You know, if I can save them a day's worth of shooting just by saying you don't need it, then why not? You know,
what if that's a valuable asset? I mean, go through the script and say, here's 10 things you don't have to shoot, and just save you a few $1,000s.
Actually, we need to shoot something else. You know,
that's true.
There's a point here where this character should be saying this or should be feeling this, and I don't think we're going to hit it with this moment. So, add something else in.
So, do they bring you in before it starts shooting so you can have input, or you come in post and read the script and then try and make stuff work?
I think a bit of both. Most of like with TV and features, certainly you want to come in beforehand, and then ideally you're shooting alongside the film, because it's. I have had it once on a feature where they just said, "Here's a big box of footage, deal with it."
God,
that was quite intense. And sometimes you'll get short films where someone said, "Oh, we shot this 6 months ago, and we maybe they had an editor who it wasn't right." I just did a short film where an editor handed it over to me because he just wasn't quite getting it, and I've carried it on, or I've started again essentially. And so but ideally you want to kind of get on ahead of time. But in terms of like the schedules for TV and stuff, I think that they want you to work alongside, because then they can see what is being got. So if things aren't working, or they can see, actually, I think we need this performance isn't right. I mean, Back to the Future is a classic example, isn't it, where Eric Stoltz was replaced because they were looking at the rushes and going, not quite right.
That's brutal.
Or Lord of the Rings, with what was his name? Who was the chap? That showbiz, can't remember his name. When Viggo Mortensen came in, he wasn't the original. He wasn't the original actor. He was.
Oh, really?
They shot with someone else who was basically just too young for the part and didn't quite have the gravity. So they kind of shot, I think, for a couple of weeks, and then unfortunately, Stuart Townsend. That's who it was. I think Stuart Townsend.
Oh, Stuart Townsend.
You kind of look at them, you go, "Oh, that's kind of the same guy," but one is older and a bit more. There's a bit more to him, I think.
A little more rugged.
A bit more lived. He's more lived, I think.
Yeah.
And so, but if they got to the end of the shooting of the Lord of the Rings and gone, "Oh God, what have we done?" That's quite a lot to go back and sort out, isn't it? So,
oh my God,
it is.
I work a lot I do movie marketing, so I do movie posters and stuff like that. So I come in very post usually, but sometimes we're working on series, and so they're happening as you're trying to figure out the marketing while they're starting to shoot like a new series or whatever. And it's interesting to like try and project what you think is the feel and tone of a show or movie before you've actually even seen it, and you're coming to post. I'm wondering, like, how do you, when you get a project like that, do you what would you consider like your style? Do you try to adapt to like what the director wants, or do you kind of bring your own thing to it and tell them, well, this is how I usually edit, or is it sort of a symbiotic relationship?
It's symbiotic. I mean, there are things that I feel like I know work and can go, okay, well, this is that sort of sequence, and I've done that before, or whatever. But it's ultimately you're responding to the material, and if I think an editor who has a style is not really, is only doing half the job really, because they're trying, I think it's more about not imposing, but it's more about bringing your ideas to it as opposed to any kind of style. If I were to rock up and say, I only like to do single takes, and I never like to use coverage, I get fired very easily. But but a scene might live with that. Like I just did a short film, like a BFI, which is the British Film Institute short film, and the director shot everything with coverage, but we ended up not using most of it. We ended up just staying with the character because so much of the story is in her head, and you need to see her reacting. But nice. You could easily have just shot it, one shot, two shot, looking at each other and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the other characters kind of aren't that important. But if I'd come in saying, "Oh, I only want to do, cross stuff," and then there's other things where, a soap opera or a sort of traditional kind of drama, I think. You want, essentially what you want to do is kind of, what does the audience want to be looking at right now? Kind of guessing, kind of, I want to see this person's reaction at this point, or what is the most important moment? What is the most important thing to be looking at this point? And then sort of work backwards, as opposed to going, I'm going to be, this film's going to be this, a Jim Page, edit,
Jim Page editor. Well, do you ever see movies and really go, wow, that editing was incredible, and like kind of like I'm going to remember that trick for one of mine. Like, do you look at like a toolbox when you look at film?
I don't know if I remember. I don't know if I. Sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if I remember like, you know, I watch the film and go, oh, I'm going to do that. But it's all absorbed. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think everything kind of goes in and you go, and stuff that took me 2 days 10 years ago takes me 30 seconds now. So I think it's that sort of kind of osmosis stuff. But yeah, I mean, I definitely like, you know, there were examples, things like, you know, Whiplash or Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a lot of editing. You know, there's a lot going on, and that's a challenge in itself to kind of tell quite a frenetic story and make it make sense. But then you've got quite, you know, gentle kind of character dramas, and the you know, the trick of that is to kind of keep the interest and keep the intrigue or whatever is going on without it becoming too busy and too kind of thing. So it's kind of looking at things in a different way based on what the material is. You know, you wouldn't cut certain material one way, but you would cut it the other way. So
sure, like you know, you say you documentary films. That's certainly a different type of editing versus doing
it's a different process. Yeah,
EastEnders or anything like that you've done. And then doing like as this Matriarch, I wouldn't fully call it a horror film, but it has horror elements. Is that the first sort of horror film that you've done, or have you done some shorts that were sort of like that?
I did a couple of shorts. One with a really good friend of mine called Nev Pierce, who was a film journalist. Is a film journalist, but he's also now a filmmaker in his own right, and we've done some shorts together. And he was. And again, that was kind of more psychological horror that became a little horrific at the end. And
what's that one called, by the way?
It's called Bricks. That's called Bricks. It's on my website. It's online.
Okay.
David Fincher really liked it. Gave us like a good quote. Scott Frank as well, like really liked it. So it did pretty well. You know, it won a couple of awards, whatever. And it's quite satirical. In, you know, it's essentially about this kind of Lord of the Manor and his kind of workmen in this cellar that's being built, and there's, you know, tension between them because of various reasons, and you know, so there's a little bit kind of allegory to, you know, the class system and all that kind of stuff. But it's also quite funny in a dark way, and you know, all that kind of stuff. I like films that do a lot of different things, but I've also done. I did a feature a couple of years ago called Playhouse, which was very much a kind of haunted house kind of film. Do you know what I mean? Where some people go to a thing. It has sort of, you know, I wouldn't say, and I'm sure the director wouldn't say it's on the same level as The Shining, because what is? But it's that kind of thing where people go to a place and then kind of go mad. But even that only has kind of a few kind of proper, you know, I think it was nominated for like a jump scare award at Fright Fest or something.
Jump scare award.
Yeah, so there's one kind of moment which is like, oh god, and even when I was editing it, I was like, oh god, every time I watch
that's I love that. I mean, first I actually see the Shining poster, a part of it back about shoulder there, and I was just talking to Kathy before. I just watched that film Exorcist 3, which has one of the greatest jump scares supposedly in movie history, and it's always fun to watch that. So a great jump scare, I'm in. You know.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we were talking before. There's I went to see Cocaine Bear last night, which is utterly ridiculous and really entertaining. And there's some like completely unnecessary jump scares in that. And they clearly thought, we're just going to do this because it's going to shock the audience because it's just entertaining. So there's lots of moments where I was going, you know, just all the way through. Someone's just walking through a door and it just becomes a jump scare.
Yeah, well, and it's directed by Elizabeth Banks, who has a kind of a wry sense of humor and stuff. So she probably threw that in just for that sort of jokey, like sort of smirking at the camera.
You know, if you go into it thinking it's The Revenant, then you're gonna lose out. But if you go into it and just like enjoying a popcorn film, I think there's quite a few things about that are kind of coming up, like Megan, for instance. You know, it's a really entertaining kind of horror comedy kind of thing, and you know, and I mean, even something like Everything Everywhere All at Once is not, you know, it's. I love films that are kind of a bit of everything.
If you want a bit of everything, you should see RRR. Because that movie,
I've seen the trailer. Just looks utterly mental.
It's so over the top in every single, whether it's action, the music, comedy. It's like Kathy Burke and I saw it when it first came out here in the U.S. before it sort of took off worldwide, and we were by ourselves, you know, in a Burbank
the theater was empty. It was during COVID.
During COVID, and we sat and watched it, and I didn't know what to make of it. I said, well, "Is this supposed to be?" I thought it might be a serious sort of period drama.
Yeah, we were like, must be important historical drama.
They're defying gravity, you know, it's just so over the top. And then I watched it a second time and I got it. And I was great. This is just so entertaining and just a big smile on my face the whole time.
It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes you watch a film and you're like, but if you actually give it a chance, you can kind of go, oh, I get it. I get it now.
Let it happen.
I think films hit you at a different time in your life, don't they? You know, things don't connect and then things do connect and then later don't. You know, they sort of go away a little bit. So it's kind of interesting how we're all, you know, there's this kind of evolving connection I think you have with with cinema that is.
That's true.
I mean, with all art, I suppose, you know, there are songs that I liked when I was 10 that I'm not so keen on now, you know.
Yeah, you know, you get older, you figure stuff out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, maybe that's not a good song.
But, you know, I still love, still love a bit of Britney. That's all right.
Sure.
Absolutely.
We'll cut that. We're going to cut that. We're going to edit that. I would love to I would love for you to see RRR and then have you back to talk about the editing, because this guy has so much coverage with the incredible camera. The camera's always moving. And I always wonder if something like that, like, I'm always impressed when someone can do a movie like that and an editor can take all this insane footage of things moving around, like fight scenes and all, and make the choreography actually make sense. I mean, where you are and you know the space and you know exactly where everybody's going. Yeah. Have you ever edited like a kind of crazy kind of action scene that is that harder to do? And how do you approach stuff like that?
I mean, it depends on how it's shot, really. Like something like David Fincher will shoot like 56 angles and do 15 takes of each one. So it's like, you know, that is literally just going, okay, well, let's just go through it. But I think you go back to kind of that thing of what should I be looking at right now? What is the audience supposed to be looking at? But with all scenes, whether it's a dialogue scene or an action scene, the first thing you do is just put it in front of you so that you can assess it. Right. And, you know, the first kind of assembly is going to be, you know, rough as hell, and you're not going to want to show it to anybody. But you just know, okay, well, I probably want to be on the wide for that bit, and I want to be on the close for that bit, and then you shuffle it all around and do it, and then you just sort of refine it. Always going, well, you know, what is the best kind of moment? And you don't really, you know, and then you're assessing, you know, okay, maybe this is kind of a cleaner shot, but that movement coming in is nicer, so maybe don't cut at all, just keep on that shot. And I just did a dance film, like a little short dance film. And actually, one of the things was letting the dance tell the story, rather than just being, you know, because you could just sort of cut it all up and make it go kind of, you know, crazy. But actually, there's, you know, it's a dance film, and people want to watch the dancing, essentially. Yeah. And same with, you know, with martial arts. I think who was it? Was it Bruce Lee or maybe Jackie Chan who said, you know, I always want you to see. Oh, Gene Kelly with dancing. I want you to be able to see my feet. You know.
Yeah, good point.
No, it's me. And you know, if you just cut things together, like really, really, I don't know if you've seen that famous clip of Liam Neeson, I think in Taken 3, leaping over a fence. And I think it takes it's like 10 seconds of footage, and I think they cut like 21 times. Literally just him getting over a fence.
What is the point of that?
Absolutely crazy. Well, I imagine it's because Liam Neeson is a 60-year-old man and couldn't get over the fence that quickly.
Can't jump the fence.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm doing him a disservice, or they just thought we need an injection of pace here.
We need some action. Let's cut it faster.
Yeah. But it's almost it looks like a parody of that kind of. It looks like an SNL sketch or something.
Yeah.
Now I want to find that scene.
So yeah, well, I'll send it to you because it's so funny.
That is really funny. Do you ever
clips like that go around the editing circles? You know what I mean? It's like,
do they? I'm sure they
do. I was just about to ask that, like,
you know, that kind of thing.
Are there like like the sort of like, since I do posters, everybody's like, oh, have you seen that poster? You know, like the worst poster ever made. I always wonder, is there in your industry, like, here's that editing scene nobody wants to do, the embarrassing thing, don't make this mistake, you know, these terrible edits. Everybody goes, don't be a Liam Neeson scene, you know.
But the problem with editing generally is you don't know what that person had to work with. Yeah. You don't know, you know, is the best film a $100 million action sequence where they, you know, action film where they spent 150 days shooting it? Is that the best edited film, or is it a film that's been shot in 10 days and they had limited stuff to work with, and what they've ended up with is a really watchable film?
Very good.
You know, it's kind of unknowable. You know, with production design or cinematography, it's right there. You can sort of see it, but because editing is kind of completely contextual, it's really difficult to kind of describe, and that's why a lot of awards go to like the most editing. You know, they go, that's got a lot of cutting in it, so it must be the best. You know what I mean?
Look at all that editing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's really funny. Do you pay attention to the awards, like the editing awards? Do you ever have like, okay, that guy is definitely going to win this award? I don't know how to judge like editing against each other, but as you're watching
me
a
really.
film, or,
I just watch a film and think, is it good? Do I like it? Do I
I don't know
notice?
if it pops out to you.
There's a kind of classic thing, which is if you notice the editing, generally it's not that great.
Right.
But then there are moments in all films where you notice where the point of the gag or the drama is the edit.
Right.
Again, it's all contextual, and it's difficult to talk about editing because it's so instinctive, and so
That's
much
true.
of it is, you know, and that's why I think, you know, where, you know, the Oscars felt comfortable having Joe Wright's, you know, editing speech, you know, editing award nominate, you know, given to him before the ceremony even started, because they're like, oh, I don't know what is editing. It's just sticking it together, isn't it? Just,
there's no talent in that.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the general public, you can't point at you know, a beautiful costume or an amazing shot with editing.
Right.
It's all contextual. You know?
That's true. Editing is kind of the invisible magic that people don't realize they're being like manipulated or brought into the story by a great edit. You know, and I know sometimes I've gone, God, that was a beautifully edited scene. I wish I could remember one right now, but you go, oh man, they did such a good job. Whether it's like you're talking about, like whether it's they cut it together really beautifully, usually an action scene, so that seems really complicated, but then you actually know what's happening and it's fluid and makes sense, or whether it's that minimal editing that's just really sensitive and delicate, like you were talking about the editing that stayed with the character in that film you talked about. I love that too. So it's kind of like you're thinking, is it good or not? And then sometimes, hey, that was a beautiful little editing scene there.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm quite lucky in that I get absorbed by films. I'm not someone, you know, I don't look at films like Neo in the Matrix where all I can see is the cuts. Do you know what I mean? It's not like you know, I can't see the Matrix code. I do actually watch the film, and if it's good, I get sucked in. But yeah, so I'm quite lucky in that regard. I think a lot of editors kind of, you know, they finish work and then they, you know, it's that classic thing of like, I'm creating art for other people that I can never see myself, you know.
Exactly.
You see, especially in your own work, because you see all the drawings and you go, oh, and for a director, it's even worse because they're going, oh, if only we'd shot another take, if only we'd done this, you know.
Like, we need this one more scene I could have used in this thing.
But actually, Ben was, you know, relatively happy, I think, with because it had been quite a difficult process. He'd had COVID, and then the lead actress had Jemima Ruper. She'd had COVID. So the production was shut down. So I think he was just pleased to get to the end of it, basically.
That's true. Yeah.
And then when he watched it, he was going, oh, actually, you know, and the other thing is being an editor is so much of it is I don't know if politics is the right word, but it's kind of, it's dealing with people essentially, you know. And so if you're working with a director, a lot of it is, in that instance, it was like, no, we do have a film. We need to do this, this, and this, but this is a good film. There's a film here. And, you know, making them feel comfortable. And also sort of knowing when to say things and when not to say them. So
yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you this, Jim. Going back to Matriarch, you know, you work on this film with Ben closely. You go back and forth, you know, months and weeks, and you come up with what you think is okay. This is the film we want, and then you send it off to Hulu or Disney, and they come back with notes. Was that kind of a tough thing? This outside people coming in, or is that just you knew that was going to be part of the gig? Dealing with this, and did that sort of affect you and sort of bother you that, oh my gosh, they're going to change it for the better or worse? I know you mentioned more horror stuff, you know, they want to add it in, but just an overall feeling of having other people come in at the 11th hour and say, okay, do this, 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 and this.
I think both Ben and I have been quite lucky in that we've had you know, I worked in documentaries for, like I say, for about 10 years. And so that's very collaborative. You're working with an edit producer or a producer, a director. You've got channel execs, you've got production company execs. And so you're never that far away from an opinion. Do you know what I mean? So you get used to it. You've always got that initial feeling of, oh, you're ruining my genius. Why are you getting involved? And so, like, you should never, it's that classic thing of you should never respond to an email straight away. You should always just sort of,
let it germinate.
But, you know, we were prepared to do that. And also, you know, I really welcome good feedback because, you know, you do get too close to it and you do kind of go, you know, the whole point of you know, Ben could cut the film himself. You know, he knows how to use an Avid, but it's good for him to have someone who isn't as close to it and can bring a different perspective to it and cut things in a different way than he was imagining. And so that's the sort of one removed, really, is that, it's good to have a producer who comes in and goes, actually, have you thought about that? And we're like, oh, no, I hadn't. And so some of the suggestions, we absolutely thought, oh, yeah, it's good idea, that. So that's what you want.
How are notes from like a studio, like different, like the corporate studio versus the people who are like involved in the film? When you get notes down from like a Hulu or a Disney or whoever, the corporate overlords, do those notes, do they differ from the approach that the creative people close to the film are? Are they more like, are they talking about like marketing and selling to a certain audience, or they give you actually good creative notes?
I think in this particular instance, I think they would just focus on the creative notes, really. I don't think I never got the sense. I mean, there was consternation about the title. Originally, the title was Worm Eater. And so there was kind of a concern that it would turn people off, basically. No one's going to click on the film. Well, some people would click on the Worm Eater, but perhaps not everyone would. So it was changed, so there was a kind of bit of a focus group going on and looking at what names and that kind of thing. So,
see, that's where I come in. Marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, so what would be a good title?
They pick 20 terrible names, and then you just have to pick one of them. Exactly. That tends to be a thing. But I think Matriarch works really well, actually.
Yeah, it's really nice, and it's accurate.
There's a bit of weight to it.
Yes,
Worm Eater, works for perhaps a different kind of film, I think.
Very true.
I think.
But in terms of their most of them, even the people who aren't necessarily directly connected in the creative process, they're doing it for creative reasons. And so, if I always feel like if the T-boy has a good idea, you should listen to it. So.
T-boy. What is a T-boy? Is that like something
the boy brings the tea?
I somehow managed to transport myself back to the 20s then, when someone, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everyone would have silver teacups on the set and sit around and I guess I mean runner, runner or PA or something. But yeah, and I think when you get I don't think you should. But it is difficult, if you're. You get close to something and then someone else goes, oh, that's rubbish. It depends on how they say it, isn't it? If they go, oh, I really like this, but have you thought?
It's so subjective too.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing.
It's art. This is art. Not everybody's going to like the art that you make. I mean, it's just the reality.
It's a very unique art as well, because you are, you can paint a picture on your own. You can't really make a film.
Yeah, this is a team. That's right.
Yeah. And so you've got to kind of be, and Ben was great in that way. He was very collaborative and he wasn't precious about things. And, he was very direct about kind of saying, oh, that's a bit shit, isn't it? Yeah, I didn't quite get that. Or, and he would allow me to kind of go, well, maybe we could just, leave it with me for a bit and I'll see if I can figure something out. And then there were some notes, which obviously we didn't agree with, but we, you have to do them and try them at least. And just by letting me work on it for a bit, I was able to go, oh, okay, figure it out, do it. And, it's in the sequence and no one looking at it would go, oh, it was never intended to be like that. Right. But, so I think it's a balance, as all things in life. It's a balance of sort of, and trying to be friends by the end of it as well is
not want to kill each other.
I've been relatively lucky in that I've stayed friends with most of the people I've worked with.
That's good. But what's on deck for you? Are you working on anything currently, or anything big coming up for you, or?
Well, obviously, I'm mainly working on my tan at the moment. That's kind of the
all that sunny weather where you are.
Focus, exactly. Yeah, which was quite. I mean, I just finished a BBC sci-fi series called Silver Point. It's the second series of Silver Point, so I've done some episodes of that. So that's having the visual effects work done and the mix and all the rest of it. So I'm not sure when that's out, but it'll be end of the year. That's on the BBC in this country, and then it'll be on Hulu, I think, around the world as well. So that's another Hulu thing. And that was great fun because it's kind of a young adult drama. But it's it's sci-fi, which is a genre I really like, and it's kind of but it's got very British sensibilities, so it's quite the humor is very British, and this season they've or series as we call them, this series has gone stepped up quite a lot. The first series was quite contained. And this series has sort of really expanded, and it's been really, really great. It's one of those jobs you think shouldn't really be this enjoyable. Why?
Everybody's way too nice.
I'm waiting for
the shooter drop.
The shooter drop. Yeah, exactly. You know, why? You know, are they getting it edited by someone else? And I'm just here playing. You know,
are they not telling me the truth back there? They're out there talking
exactly.
about me. Yeah. Do you have a favorite genre that you prefer, that you like doing the most, or are you? Because it sounds like you've done a lot of different types of editing.
Yeah, for better or worse, I've done a lot of different things, which I think means I'm reasonably versatile. I think, but it also means people aren't necessarily able to go, oh, what does he do? You know, that kind of thing. But I think most editors feel that way. They like doing lots of different kinds of things. Right. All editors hate dinner table scenes because there's just so many angles and people looking in different directions and getting the getting the rule of 180, getting people looking at the right angle, you know, all that kind of stuff. And there's so much coverage and all that kind of stuff.
I love that.
But in terms of genre, I mean, I really like. I mean, this again sounds a bit cheesy, but it comes down to like the story. You know, if I really connect with the story, whether it's a monster movie or whether it's just over my shoulder, there's a little short here called Twice as Good, and that was commissioned by Film 4 over here. And that's a really small character drama, really, about this single black mother and her slightly disabled young son. And they come home one day from shopping. It's been a long day, and all the rest of it. They come into the kitchen, and there's a man in a sort of homemade time travel suit, just sat on the floor, covered in blood.
Oh,
and it's and then what sort of starts as quite a naturalistic drama becomes this kind of sci-fi thing, but then actually becomes this sort of social commentary thing. Which
that sounds good.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of moves through different kind of ways, and because there's layers to it, you can, the thing I loved about Everything Everywhere All at Once is you can look at it as an action film, you can look at it as a genre film, but really what it is, it's about this relationship between a mother and daughter and just not connected. I think any film, Wrath of Khan is actually about getting old and dealing with the past. It's not really about, spaceships and all that kind of stuff.
That's true.
I think so. That's one of the reasons why I really like genre films is that you can sort of, if you did them as just two people sat in a room talking, it might not be that interesting. But if you do them on the bridge of the Enterprise, it suddenly becomes kind of exciting and engaging. And so, I think it's, that's the, characters and conflict and relationships are the center of all films, aren't they? Really? So
that's true. And we have strong relationships and subtext brings, I think, more depth to the film in general. Like something like Hereditary, which is one of our favorite horror films.
Yeah,
it's basically just about a family that's so dysfunctional and so many bad things happening, but ultimately those characters are so strong and the relationship's so complex and interesting that the horror aspect's almost secondary to that film.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same with Matriarch. The film is not about the horror. It's about
it's not.
This relationship between a mother and daughter. This really dysfunctional moment. Yeah. And then it's dressed up in the kind of horror clothes, but it's not about that, And that's what I really responded to,
Yeah, I think that's genre. You put that in the horror genre, but it's not. It's really a drama about a relationship, and there are horror elements. I think the best genre films are ones that focus on the characters, and then you sprinkle in the sci-fi or the horror or the action, whatever. And I think those are the ones that are engaging. Those are the ones that stay with you. And I think that's what made Matriarch why we liked it so much. Is like, there's horror elements. The great scene at the end of the greenhouse. All that stuff is really cool, but the relationship was compelling from the outset. The characters, were really compelling, and that's what made it a good film. So I'm glad it's doing well. I always see it as a tile, who's still up there. One of the first things I see when I go to the Hulu, page. So I'm sure it's doing really well. And
they seem very happy with it. And
that's good.
It's funny, you get to the end of the project and it takes you a while to kind of digest what you've done, really.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do something and you think, I'm going to need another 5 years before I can watch that again. But I feel like I can watch bits of Matriarch and go, you know what, that's pretty good. You always do your own worst critic and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like I can stand behind it, and I think that's important.
Yeah. And you work so closely with all those people. It's almost like a family, and also it's just done. That's so weird. Yeah.
And I think it's worse for people who work on set because they are literally sweating for 20 hours a day or whatever, together and sleeping in accommodation together and going to the pub, and you become this little community, and then you just scatter,
just disappears,
and then you might never see them again, because everyone's working,
everybody does something different. Yeah,
so strange.
Jim, I'd love to see some of your shorts. So what's your website?
So my website is www. Do you have to say the www anymore?
I don't even know.
No, actually, it's one of the only kind of acronyms that's actually slower to say than just saying were.
Better than do that.
World Wide Web is quicker. There's less syllables in World Wide Web.
World Wide Web.
Anyway, it's jimpage.co.uk.
Okay.
And so there's the shorts on there, and then there's links to the features. And I've also I had a sort of a career doing branded stuff for like Sony and Disney and corporate, not corporate, like commercials and that kind of thing. And I also did documentaries for Discovery and the BBC and stuff. So there's quite a lot on there. So if you're that bored, then you can really you can really dine out on my website.
No, I'm looking forward to watch your shorts. So thank you for. I encourage all our viewers to also check it out because and if they haven't seen Matriarch, please check it out on Hulu because it really is a winner. And it's one that holds up too after a second viewing. I can attest to that. So
that's
wonderful. And then I let us know when you eventually get to RRR. Yes. And we'll talk to you about the editing. Keep in mind that movie's almost 4 hours long. So that's my movie.
Yeah, watch it as a series, 4 1-hour episodes.
Just watch like an hour a night.
And maybe we'll get Ben on too. We can all have a big powwow about it.
That'd be good. Yeah. Ben's a great talker and he's a really thoughtful, interesting bloke as well. So it's
he's a good man. We liked him very much.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, this was really fun. So and don't go away. I'm going to do the outro and then we'll just chat a little bit more. But thanks very much for coming on.
Very, very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. See ya.